And that will move us to number 9 on our agenda, the approval of the minutes of the July 13th, 2023 special called board meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hooken.
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2023 special called board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Snipes. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the July 17th, 2023 board meeting? Mr. Hogan.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 17th, 2023 board meeting.
Do I have a second? Ms. Huddle? Seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0. And that moves us to public participation. I'd like to remind our audience that the board welcomes and encourages public participation. We respectfully ask that you adhere to the procedures provided in Board Policy BEDH, public participation at meetings. Your comments should be limited to 3 minutes and must remain on either the topic noted on your sign-in form or a listed agenda item. Questions asked during public participation will be handled in accordance with Board Policy BEDH. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brandy Sturdivant is here to speak about book bans.
Does the timer start or do I start?
You start and I'll start.
Okay. Hi, my name is Brandy Sturdivant. I am a parent here in District 5. My daughter is in the Gifted program. She's entering 7th grade this year, so very excited to have her. Dr. Ross talked about in his superintendent report students feeling depressed and anxious, and one of those reasons is not being accepted. So this book, the family book, has been banned or challenged in other places, and I'd like to briefly read it or sections of it for you today so we can see what types of books are being banned. So the book starts, some families are big, some families are small. Some families are the same colors, some families are different colors. All families like to hug each other. Some families live near each other, some families live far from each other. Some families look alike, some families look like their pets. All families are sad when they lose someone they love. Some families have a stepmom or stepdad and stepsisters or stepbrothers. Some families adopt children. Some families have 2 moms or 2 dads. Some families have 1 parent instead of 2. All families like to celebrate special days together. Some families eat the same things, some families eat different things. Some families like to be quiet, some families like to be noisy. Some families like to be clean, some families like to be messy. Some families live in a house by themselves, some families share a house with other families. All families can help each other be strong. There are lots of different ways to be a family. Your family is special no matter what kind it is. Love, Todd. And for books like this to be challenged in other places, we have to be careful that books that are as innocent and as warming as this aren't challenged here as well. Thank you.
Catherine Satterfield is here to speak about books and educator support.
Good evening, Dr. Ross, school board members, and those in attendance here today. My name is Catherine Satterfield. I'm a proud retiree of 29 years in School District 5. I started out at Irmo Elementary as a media assistant following graduation from USC and ended my career in 2016 as a 2nd grade teacher at Chapin Elementary. My family consists of 4 graduates of this district, 1 being special needs, and 2 grandchildren currently enrolled in D5. Our family has been a part of this community since 1977 when my husband and I attended USC. I'm here to express my concern regarding the way educators are being treated and the political infusion in our schools. For many years, schools were considered hands-off when it came to politics and special interest groups. Unfortunately, political groups are desperately trying to gain a foothold in our schools by using scare tactics such as CRT and catchphrases like indoctrination and take back our schools. The Freedom Caucus and Moms for Liberty openly support a particular Republican Party, whose sole purpose is not to save education, but to expand their base. Books are evil. That book was my book. I read that to my students. But to expand their base. Books are evil. Teachers are indoctrinating kids. CRT, LGBTQ, etc., etc. Come on, folks. I beg you to please leave our schools alone. Help us restore teachers and educators' faith in themselves and in this community. The atrocity of the past will not repeat itself as long as we are truthful and remind our children and ourselves that slavery was horrible and we should all be embarrassed from it. Children of all genders, nationalities, and religions should be treated with respect. They all deserve a safe and nurturing environment in which to learn and grow. My God tells me not to judge and to love one another and to treat one another as we want to be treated. Why are such simple concepts so difficult to understand? Thank you.
Susan Adams is here to speak as a retired educator.
Since I retired, I usually lurk in the back and just email if I want to say something. But I'm a retired educator. I'm a resident of this district. I have 2 grandchildren who attend school in this district, and I volunteer at the schools in the Irmo cluster. As a teacher, I taught my students how to research. The most important rules in research are to look for reputable sources, to verify the information you find by looking for the source of the information so you can evaluate to see if it's biased and if the information is current, and to find the information in more than one source. My students didn't always like the information they found. Sometimes it conflicted with what they thought they already knew. Or it made them sad, like when they heard that more than 1,600 students are still missing who fought in Vietnam, and they're just missing. The information might make them mad. Nearly 2,500 U.S. personnel and 68 civilians died when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. My students were mad. But we teachers don't just teach what makes our students comfortable, and some classes just aren't appropriate for some students. After all, when I was in high school, trigonometry made me very uncomfortable, so I didn't enroll in that class. An AP English class is structured to teach students to look at difficult subjects, research the issues, form an opinion, and defend that opinion. Some students aren't ready to do that, and that's okay. And no AP class is ever required for graduation. I urge you as board members to support excellence in education, to follow the procedures if a student or parent is uncomfortable. Tell them to talk to their teacher. Then they should talk to an administrator at the school, and only then should they go to the district office. Ask them to follow that procedure, and I ask you to follow that procedure too. And finally, I want to tell you, if you're comfortable learning history, then you're probably learning the wrong history.
Kim Benson is here to speak about freedom to teach and freedom to read.
Hello. Thank you all for encouraging our public participation. I'm going to put a little spin on that, if it's okay. and I check the rules, and I hope that what I'm gonna do falls within the rules, because it did say you are welcome to ask questions. So I'm gonna ask questions to all in attendance. It's like a little game, is that okay? Okay, let's try it and see. Tell me if you can identify this character and where you learned about this character. So what book is this character from? Wilbur.
Charlotte's Web.
Okay. Lenny Smalls. Of Mice and Men. Good. Margaret Simon. The board is not answering any of these questions. Margaret Simon. I'll give you a hint. She just came to life in a movie.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. Anne Frank. Okay, good. The Onceler. The Lorax, very good. Okay. This is a set of 3. Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. Very good, very good. Okay, Tree and Boy. The Giving Tree. Frodo. Okay, I'm gonna have to turn this way. They are not answering any of these questions. Frodo. Okay. Offred. Oh, you're not supposed to respond. Okay. They're smart. They know them all. We'll just take it at that. I'm sorry, who? Offred? The Handmaid's Tale. Max.
Where the wild things are.
See? Just the word Max automatically brings that book to mind. Katniss.
Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm. Miss Silly. Miss Seeley. The Color Purple. Mr. Darcy.
Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice. Lyra. Mm-hmm. The Golden Compass. Yeah, his Dark Materials. Last one, Dumbledore.
Harry Potter.
If I've named one of your favorite beloved characters from books you've read throughout your life, from children's books to literature, books we consider literature, every single one of the books that these characters are from have all been banned and challenged at some point in the United States. And imagine, just imagine.
Steve Newsom is here to speak about intellectual freedom.
Hi. Dr. Ross, board members, thanks for your time. My name is Steve Newsom. I'm not an employee anymore, but I have taught English for 16 years. I was a former Lex Rich 5 long-term sub at the Academy for Success. My wife, Katie, taught art at Dutch Fork Middle for several years. I think one of your stated missions, maybe the most important one, is every student feels loved in our schools. And as an English teacher, I know that research tells us that what makes students feel loved, we have to represent them in the books we choose, the articles we discuss, the poems we read, and in the topics we choose. Discomfort by necessity is necessary for learning. Educational psychologist Lev Vygotsky once wrote about a zone of proximal development. Essentially, that means that students have to be moved out of their comfort zones, what they know now, and into a place just uncomfortable enough to allow them to learn new things. Reading Between the World and Me for the past 5 years with my AP Lang students, they were sometimes uncomfortable. They were sometimes inspired, they were sometimes challenged, and because of that, they became better at writing, at arguing, and understanding the ideas and arguments of others, whether they agreed with the arguments made by the book or not, and whether they were uncomfortable or not. This district is concerned, like with every district now, with improving literacy. And to put it simply, the research tells us that when students read, write, and communicate better, it's because they read more. How do we get them to read more? We have to find high interest texts. We have to make sure all students are represented in our choices of texts. And we have to give students more choices of optional texts like library books and not fewer choices. The district's goal to increase student mental health outcomes is also dependent on representing students in the books we read and in the articles we discuss and in the poems we read together. LGBTQ plus students have higher rates of anxiety, depression, and trauma, as do students of color. Research from the Trevor Project and others tells us that when at-risk students feel supported at school, their reported likelihood of self-harm and suicide decreases. And part of that is in the books that we choose and the things that we discuss in class and in the library books that are optional for students to read. Moms for Liberty and related groups that have been mentioned already are often challenging books under the premise that students should not be indoctrinated. I think all of us agree with that, but some of those groups are also supporting things like PragerU being adopted as official curriculum materials, and that started in our state. I'm sure it'll come to our district too. This demonstrates that the goal is not to avoid indoctrinating students, but instead to ensure that students are only hearing a preferred narrative. So instead, let's allow teachers and librarians working together with elected officials, parents, and community stakeholders to make decisions about what we're going to offer in our schools. Thank you.
All right, that concludes public participation.